The next concept I want to look at is writing an equation of a sinusoidal. And that is really based upon the idea that we're going to use our standard form, which looks like y minus k equals a positive or negative amp, a sine or a cosine curve, and then a b value, and x minus h. All right, now realize that k will pretty much be the middle of these numbers, and we get that by averaging the high and low points. And so on this graph, it's spelled out pretty nicely, but if you can see that the lower limit is 0 and the upper limit is 4, our average of those two numbers has to be 2. So that means our k value is going to be 2 in the equation. The amplitude is going to be the distance between the middle of the curve and the top of the curve, or even the middle of the curve measuring to the bottom. And in this case, the amp is 2. We'll come back to the positive and negative after we pick our curve. So since, the way that this is set up, I'm going to trace a sine curve in green and just kind of code that. So green equals a sine curve. What we want to look at is to figure out the period. We want to look at the endpoints of where that curve begins and where that curve ends on the x-axis. And so this distance is going to represent the period, which can be found by taking the bigger number minus the smaller number. And hopefully you recognize that the two negatives turn into a positive, leaving you with just pi. So the period is pi. The b value can be found by taking 2 pi over the period, which will be 2 pi over pi, which gives us 2. So up in our equation, I'm going to put 2 there. Since I traced a sine curve to start with, I'm going to go ahead and select the word sine. And really the only thing left in our equation is to figure out if my sine curve heads up or down. And if you look over on the left, since this curve starts in the middle and heads down, this is going to be a negative sine curve because the first movement actually starts in the middle heading down. And as far as the horizontal shift, this number right here will be our horizontal shift because that's where the curve starts at. So it's going to be x plus pi over 4 because we always have the opposite sign. Now, moving forward, when we write the cosine curve, the only thing that will change is we replace the word sine with cosine. The starting position may vary, and the sign out front may change, but everything else stays the same. So if you look at what we have, if I trace a cosine curves have to start either at a high point or a low point. So I'm going to trace a cosine curve in yellow here. And let's see. This would be my cosine curve in yellow. So yellow equals cosine. And that curve on the x-axis actually starts at 0. So in my parentheses, I can put x minus 0, I can just write x. And since it starts low, the sign out front before the amplitude will be in negative.